There's always going to be someone out there who's better than you or appears better than you on social media. And there's always going to be people who are below you. And I think you have to say, it's okay that I'm not the top expert. However, does that diminish all the valuable things I know? No, not at all. Can I help people? Yes. And you just have to keep that in mind. You don't have to be the number one expert to be good at what you do.
Welcome to the Shift Your Day Job podcast. I'm Brittany Cates, career coach and fellow career shifter, here to help you leave unfulfilling work behind. Every Thursday, I share stories, strategies, and confidence-boosting insights to help you gain clarity, take action, and create a career you love. Let's shift your day job together. Hello, and welcome back to the Shift Your Day Job podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to my guest, Rayna Rokicki, podcast. Rayna started her career as a podcast and YouTube producer, helping entrepreneurs amplify their voices. But as more clients sought her out for podcast growth strategy, she realized her true zone of genius lay in helping business owners turn their podcasts into powerful tools for authority, client attraction, and monetization without relying on sponsors. So in 2024, she made the leap into podcast growth coaching full-time and has not looked back. In this episode, Rayna will share how she navigated her own career pivot, plus also how to use podcasting to grow your authority, land speaking opportunities, and attract dream clients. So if you're ready to amplify your voice and scale your business, this conversation is for you. Please welcome Rayna to the podcast. Hi, Rayna. How are you today?
I'm really good, Brittany. I'm excited to be here and chat with your audience. So I'm all about helping women find new career paths. Don't be afraid to leap into something new. I think too many of us have the mindset of what if it doesn't work? But you'll never know, right? Unless you take that leap, you get out there and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about your leap that you made. Like, what were you doing and how did it lead you to where you are today?
Yeah, great question. It's a long story. I'm sure many people are. So I'm going to try to condense it. So before I entered the podcasting world, I was a middle school and high school teacher. Really fun. I still love teaching, of course. However, my family and I, we were actually teaching overseas. We were at an international American school in Nigeria for 6 years. And we were there from 2014 till COVID. And then COVID happened. We flew back to the States and we just finished teaching online. And it was at that point I had a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And I thought, I don't know how in the world I'm going to make this work teaching in the US when there's no daycare. I have to teach online. I have to teach in person. And although I loved teaching, I still like it. I was looking for another career that just dug into a little bit more of some of the passions I had, which were helping women. I feel like ever since I became a mom, I saw all the different hats that women wear, all the I guess, invisible expectations on us to be child carers for the parents and then your own children and society in general. I know you know what I'm talking about. And I was like, I need to do something to make women's lives easier. And I had always loved doing audio and video projects with my students. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to not teach this next year. I'm going to look into doing something different. And I first started just as a virtual assistant. I was like, let's just see where this goes. I'm like, I'm highly organized. I work with people all the time. I was like, I can do this. One of my first clients was a productivity coach, and she had a YouTube channel and a podcast. And she took me under her wing, taught me everything. And I was like, oh, yeah, I love this stuff. This is what I'm doing with my students, just at a different level. And then from there, I dove deep. I took a lot of courses. I hired coaches. And then I started producing podcasts for other women entrepreneurs. I do work with men. However, most of my clients are women because my company is called Ladies First Digital Media Company. And yeah, it's been a great journey. I have my own podcast. So I feel like if you love podcasts, if you're working in the podcast world, it just makes you want to have your own. One of my podcasts is called Betcha She Did. It's all about rad women entrepreneurs in the Midwest. That's like my passion project podcast. And then my newest podcast last summer is called Podcast Growth Club. And that's just me being a podcast coach, giving tips and strategies. And like you mentioned in the bio, I've been doing a lot of producing for different women. And then I don't know what happened to shift in the universe in 2024, but a lot of people were like, hey, I need your help growing my podcast, or I need your help monetizing it. And that's something I worked on top 1% podcasts. I worked on very niche ones. And I was like, yeah, this is something I feel like I know the industry really well. And then my podcast mentor, Adam Shively of Podcasting Business School, he was starting a podcast growth coaching certification. And it's the only one I know of in the world where he trains you on how to specifically grow podcasts. And he's been wildly successful. He has been podcasting for a long time, like 11 years maybe, made over $1 million with his podcast without sponsors. He's all about growing your own business. So he's taught myself and about 10 other growth coaches the inside of what works. And so that's where I am. Took that leap, wasn't exactly sure where I was going to go, but it's been a really good ride. Definitely some ups and downs though. It's not all like perfect and smooth sailing and everything's working out. And you learn a lot about yourself along the way, but I'm really happy I have.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's really interesting how you were able to recognize the things in teaching that you really enjoyed doing. And then you were able to take that and say, how can I apply that over here? And I think a lot of times people get stuck in they can't see how their skill set translates to a
Exactly.
completely different area. And that kind of
Yes.
like shuts their mind off to this idea that there's something else out there that they could be doing.
Or that they have, like you said, already these super valuable skills that they use every day, whether it's budgeting for your family. Even if you're a stay-at-home mom, you are multitasking all the time, in charge of all these different things. That's pretty much project management. And you could apply that to so many other areas. So yeah, take what you're passionate about, what you're interested in learning more about, and see where it goes. And don't be afraid to learn. I think sometimes people are afraid of failure. And I definitely used to be like this, like one of those recovering perfectionists. But now I see the value of just don't be afraid to fail. Like failing is part of the process. You got to try different things. Some of it's going to work and some of it isn't. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. It's not like in a traditional job where like it didn't work and now you're going to get fired. It didn't work. What did I learn from that? All right, now let's pivot this way and apply it in this new realm. Let's try this next strategy.
Yeah. So it makes me think of when you teach a lesson and it doesn't quite go the way that you had planned or hoped, or the kids
Yes.
don't quite get it. And then you're like, oh man. And at first you feel like, oh, I bombed. It was terrible. But you also know that the kids need to learn this thing. And so you're like, okay, what do I got to do? You take the information you gleaned from that failure of a
Yes.
lesson and how they responded to you, and then you try again, right? It's not like
Exactly.
you give up and you're like, they're never going to learn that concept.
I know exactly. You're like, that didn't work. So now let's try this strategy. And oh, that worked for half of the kids, but it didn't work for the other half. So let's try this. And then you slowly refine what works for this individual group of students, just like whatever your target might be in this pivot. It's, oh, you're constantly learning, constantly refining. And that's just part of it.
Yeah. Did you ever come across the feeling of imposter syndrome? Like, how could I move from being a teacher to a VA or even a podcasting manager?
Yes. Yeah. 100%. The imposter syndrome is real. Even when you know that you're like, I know this stuff and I know how to do it. There's always going to be someone out there who's better than you or appears better than you on social media. And there's always going to be people who are below you. And I think you have to say, it's okay that I'm not the top expert. However, does that diminish all the valuable things I know? No, not at all. Can I help people? Yes. And you just have to keep that in mind. You don't have to be the number one expert to be good at what you do. And I also think, okay, so I heard this amazing woman speaker at a conference last year, and she had this great analogy about Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I'm going to share it with your audience because it was so funny and it really hits home. So she talked about how we all need to be more like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And at first I was like, what? This is like a women's conference, right? I'm like, why are we talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger? However, this is how she laid it out. She said, okay, so when Arnold first started, he wanted to be Mr. Universe, pumped all the weights, and he had the body for it and he did well. Congratulations to him. That's awesome. After that, he was like, you know what? I want to be an American movie star. Now, for most people, that is such a big leap, going from a bodybuilder to a movie star. But if you look at the record, he did it. And people loved him. He had a whole bunch of fun movies from The Terminator to, I can't remember, Twins, Daddy Daycare, whatever it might have been. He did it. Is he the world's best actor? No, not at all. He's goofy, a little awkward, but endearing, and people loved him. And he made this leap. And then from there, he went on to say, oh, I now want to be involved in politics, and then became the governor of California. Again, bodybuilder, actor. And, oh, you're going to be in politics? No, there's no way, right? It's going to work. He did it. And he did a fairly good job for the most part. And it just goes to show, if Arnold can do it, if he can set these ginormous goals, why can't we? Why do we always have that self-doubt that's holding us back? We're afraid of failure like he wasn't, and he made it work. These impossible leaps that would have never happened. But if we are more like him, if we can say, you know what? I'm not going to go for the $100,000. I'm going to go for the $1,000,000. Like, dream bigger. I don't want to just be a VA. I want to be a podcast coach. Go bigger, because even if you don't reach that goal, you're going to extend yourself so much further than if you hadn't tried at all. If you stay small, you'll always stay small. If you play small, you'll always stay small. You know what I mean? Mm. And I think as women, we're taught to be safe. We're taught not to take risks. We're taught not to think beyond that realm. And we need to encourage each other to go bigger, because there's so much more that we can do.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I actually watched the Netflix show Arnold, and it was so good. It's pretty found it. If you want to dig in a little bit more about that. But yeah, no, I love that comparison, and it makes me think of the book 10 times is easier than 2 times.
I was just going to mention that. I know, right? It makes so much more sense. If you only go double, you're going to burn out. You're going to have double the work. But if you think 10x, you have to change the way you do things, which is actually going to get your results versus just trying to double exactly what you're doing. It's brilliant. That's what we need to do. We need to 10x it. Think differently. What do you need to drop to move to that next level?
Yeah. And looking at change as an opportunity rather than a setback.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It's something that has been on my mind this week with some changes that the new year is here, and it's here with a vengeance. That'll be for me. With these changes comes grief, which you have to feel. You also then need to recognize and embrace what's coming next. And those two things are allowed to exist at the same time. Thing that we think, oh, I got to just stop feeling bad and just move on, or I'm stuck here and I can't get over this thing and I can't move on. But you can be both at the same time. You can have these opposing feelings because we're not one-dimensional beings, right?
Right. Yeah, and you have to dig into that uncomfortableness to move forward. You can't ignore it or push it aside, because it will keep coming back. But dig into it. What is it trying to teach you? There's a lesson there. And then move forward. And it's probably trying to point you in the right direction.
Exactly. Because we are made for abundance, and God, the universe, is going to lead and guide us on our path. One other thing that resonated with me was about being of service. No matter where you might be on the success ladder, we are all available to serve and use our talents to touch the people that need us specifically, because not everybody needs the top tier Tony Robbins method. Some people need someone that's maybe closer to where they want to be, and so it doesn't feel like such a big leap. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I think making sure you're serving others, especially those that you're passionate about, is super important. For myself, it's women. I want to make women's lives easier. So finding ways to elevate them through podcasts, to get their voice out, to get their stories out, to help them move forward in the world is key. And I think it's obviously not an equal society yet. And I think we really need to make sure that we are extending a hand down to those below us, or a ladder, not pulling it up behind us. Hey, I made it this far. Let me show you how. Let me help bring you up here as well. Let me keep rising the tide as we all go. Because if we're not helping each other, there's going to be no progress. So we need to see each other not as competition, but as collaboration. There's more than enough room for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. That having that abundance mindset, that there's a place for everyone. And that I think women are socialized to be in competition with each other. And it's something we need to
throw out the door.
Yeah. And so with every step in this direction. Having that abundance mindset and knowing that there's enough to go around and recognizing that when one woman succeeds, it gives you permission to succeed as well is so important for us to grasp and embody.
Yes, totally. And cheer her on too, right? I think we
Yeah.
all need to be each other's hype woman. Like, cheer that person on, let her know she's not alone. We got her back. We see what she's doing. It's so important. One thing that's really helped me actually, especially in the early years, was having a like-minded group of other women entrepreneurs. Not necessarily a mastermind, but we would meet monthly, just talk about what we're going through, problem solve together, support each other. And that was super helpful because people just had really good brainstorms about ways to solve problems. And there was this camaraderie where you didn't feel alone, even though we were in different fields. It was lovely to know we all had each other's backs and we were supporting in a variety of ways.
Yeah. And again, seeing that other people are doing what you're doing and that it is possible, right? Especially when you might be surrounded by people that aren't doing that and don't understand what you're trying to do.
100%. Yeah, you've got the naysayers, right? Who are like,
Yeah.
you're crazy. What are you doing? You should have just stayed in that teaching job, got your pension. Nope, those people are great. They might be your family. However,
You.
yeah, you need to surround yourself with big thinkers, right?
Mm.
Because it pushes you. I remember there was one woman in the group when we first started, and she was like, next year, I'm going to make $150,000. And I wasn't making a lot of money at that point. And I was like, wow, that's her goal. And it made me want to push myself more, think differently. Like, what do I need to shift in my business, in the way I'm doing things to imagine that's possible? And if you're only yourself with people who are like, I'm just going to make $30,000 this year, you're not going to go somewhere. So find someone in that next step and just see, oh, they're a big dreamer. I need to be by them and get that energy.
Yeah, it really is an energy exchange. And you just said something.
That's okay.
Oh, we are basically the sum total of the 5 people we spend most time with, right?
Yes.
And so if you start recognizing like, oh, I'm surrounded by people that are not elevating themselves, like I want to elevate myself, then it's time to add and subtract, right?
Exactly.
From those top 5 people that you want to spend most time with. And that can look like in a physical sense, but it can also be, we have so many resources now online that it can be a coach, it can be a podcast, it can be anything.
Books. Yeah.
Boom. Yeah, there's just so many resources out there to get you in that mindset of elevating the energy and thinking bigger, like you keep saying.
Yeah.
So let's see. Can you discuss maybe a tough moment in your transition that really like sticks out to you and how you like worked through that challenge?
Yeah, sure. Roundabout story. So last spring, I switched to the podcast coaching and I was still doing some producing as well. And things were getting really busy in a good way because I found I was at my desk all the time. I was stressed out. I wasn't having the time I wanted for my family, for myself, other things. And I had to reevaluate a little bit. I was like, is this what I really want? Is this why I switched careers? I was like, I'm not as happy as I thought I would be. And what I needed to do was drop some things and invite other things into place. And so first I paused for a while because I had to really think about it. I didn't stop working, but I was like, I need to stop the marketing and whatnot. I need to just think, let this settle in, pause, and then take a look at my values and say, is this matching? Is this not? And I do love the podcast work, but I was like, I don't want it to be this much of my life where it's taking away from everything else. And so I had to actually scale back a little bit in the number of clients. And what I did, which hopefully this is inspiring to your listeners, I love physical fitness and I feel like moving your body is really important. And if I sit at a desk all day, it does not make me a happy person. And so I was like, I got to find a way to get more movement into my life. I'm a former dancer, so I do have that background. So I reached out to a local dance company that does aerial. And I was like, hey, do you need another teacher? And they're like, yes. So I started teaching there 1 day a week. I don't know aerial, but I started last year. So I'm learning it and I'm teaching just the youngers. So that was really fun because I got some physical fitness, it's getting that dance side of me. And then there's a yoga studio in town that teaches bar classes. And that's something I've done before. So I was like, do you need another bar teacher? I teach at least once during the week. And it's been nice because I'm finding a better balance of getting that physical fitness, fulfilling that dance creative movement need, and then still doing the stuff I love, which is podcasting, but it's just at a much better balance. Sometimes you think, oh, I love this. This is what I want to do. But then you get overwhelmed and it takes over your life. And you're like, that is not what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good lesson because sometimes you know what you want, but you go after it in a way that harms your personal life, your family life. And then you panic because you're like, wait, I thought this was my dream. What's happening? It's okay to reinvent it. It's okay to pivot it. It's okay to shift things. Just because that's what you thought you wanted might not be, you might need to change it a little bit. And don't be afraid of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes you think of when I was learning UX design, my coach at the time, when she would bring women into the program, she'd say, okay, we're going to start down this path. And as you start taking action, you're going to then discover, is this really for me? Is this really what I want? And if along the way you decide, no, it's not, I actually want to do this, I am here to support you in taking the action steps to start figuring out what it is you want to do. And the only way you're going to figure it out is if you start something and then have the experience and build the evidence, right? For or
Yes.
against it. And so I just loved that she was so encouraging of, I'm not here to be like, you started this program, you got unfinished.
I think too often we make these rules or society, or this is what I said I was going to do, and this is what I should do. Like, I can't reinvent my life, or I'm like, my dream life, which I'm working towards, is to work 3 days a week and then also have like physical fitness. I am not there yet, but we'll get there. And I know in some ways it feels naughty. I don't know if that's the right word, but people are like, you have to work 40 hours. You can't do that and still make a good income and do what you want. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's society or what, but I have to tell myself, like, why can't I go after what I want? Why am I not doing that? Why am I trying to live in this box that someone else set up for me?
Yeah, exactly. And another thing you mentioned is that you reached out to these studios and asked them if they needed a teacher.
Yeah,
Which
totally.
is so cool. And also an example of, hey, ask for what you need.
What you want. Totally. I know they could have said no, but I was like, I won't know till I ask. So
Yeah.
let's just see.
And by doing that and not just going to the classes, but teaching them, you're using your brain in a different way than you do
Yes.
typically as a podcast manager. And then that opens up doors for more creativity and expanding, giving you that time to yourself where you are moving your body and you're using your brain in a different way. That's going to reveal
Yes.
new things to you.
Totally. And I love it, brings back that teaching component that I really liked. I was like, oh, I'm working with students and I'm working with adults and it's so fun. And the bonus, all my dance classes and all my yoga classes are now free. So there we go.
I love it. That's awesome. No, I think that's a really good tip for people to consider. Okay, because I had that recently too, where November, December, I was just feeling so burnt out and overwhelmed
Yes.
with all the things I was doing. And I have a coach that was able to be like, so you're doing too much. Some more like, let's just narrow it down to what's the most important. And everything else will fall into place if you focus on the things that are the most important, like your health, your mental and emotional and physical health, and
Yes.
prioritizing your job and then letting the podcasting come third. And that's okay.
Totally. Especially around the holidays. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Time is just so much going on.
Yeah. One thing, so you mentioned that you currently have a teacher or the man that taught you how to help. How would you describe it?
Yeah, he's my mentor, my podcast mentor, and I still work with him. I guess you could say he's my coach too, but
Okay.
it's great because we meet twice a month it's almost like a mastermind with other podcast producers or podcast coaches, and it's a very supportive group of people. We all problem solve together. We're always learning, talking about what works, what doesn't, and it's I feel like that's really important. For a long time, I didn't hire a coach. I was like, I'm just going to bootstrap it. I'm going to watch a lot of videos. Like I took some classes.
Mhm.
That was a mistake. I feel like hire a coach. They are going to make it so much better and faster for you. So don't do what I
Mhm.
did for the first few years. Yeah, and even it's interesting, like, he's at such a top level, but he hires coaches all the time too. Like, he's working with the coach for Threads and another, like, strategic coach, and I was like, "Okay, so this coaching thing doesn't end. You just keep
Yeah.
leveling up and leveling up."
Yeah, for sure. And so you mentioned that there's like only 10 people that he's taught
Yeah.
this so far, right? And
Mhm.
so that's really cool that you are one of the first, right, out there to help people with monetizing their podcast and
Growing
gaining more
it.
reach. And
Mhm.
yeah, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been neat. I'm really glad he did the program because it's worked for his clients, and it's interesting. It's a lot of stuff that goes against the noise that's out there for what people say you should do with your podcast, which is fascinating. But it makes sense when you see it into action. Like, for example, if you're in the podcast space, obviously, and maybe some of your listeners are as well, a lot of the noise in the podcast space is you need to do video and you need to be everywhere and you need to do this and that. You can be an audio only podcast and be very successful. You do not need to be everywhere. Pick one or two platforms, focus on those, and maybe even a little bit of experimenting. Okay, I tried this one for 90 days. I didn't get a lot of engagement. So let me try this. It's more important to maybe do podcast guesting, to do collaborations with other podcasters, to show up at summits where your people are. That's what's really going to get you those new listeners, make those connections versus spending money on Facebook ads and killing yourself making 20 reels a week, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm like, that helps me. It helps my brain
Yeah.
to hear it. So, was there ever a point where you thought, like in the beginning, because you've talked a lot about the trainings that you've done or the mentorships that you've had, but just like before even getting into the space, was there this thought of, I need more education or like I need something else in order to be qualified to actually do this thing that, and how did you
Well, I
figure
think,
out maybe not
yeah.
quite what I'm anticipating?
Yeah, I feel well, when I first started as a virtual assistant, I did do a course for it because I was like, okay, let's be officially certified. That'll help. So I felt like I was ready. But the hardest part actually at first was getting someone to hire you, right? Because they were always looking for something really specific. They were going to a place where people just got certified to post, like, oh, I need someone for this. But then they wanted experience on Airtable or Notion, all these different programs. And you're like, I can learn it, but I don't have it yet because I haven't gotten this. And I felt the first couple months were really hard because I felt like I applied to so many positions and just a lot of crickets. Didn't hear anything. And that was frustrating because I'm like, I know I can do a lot of these things. Granted, I haven't done it in a position before, but I was like, I know I can do it. I know I can do it well. I feel like I grew a very strong backbone through that experience of just getting turned down, getting just apply, and it didn't work. It didn't work. It didn't work. And that was not the first time, but one of the only times in my life where I felt like that happened. When you're a teacher, it's fairly easy to get hired. They need teachers. I haven't had other jobs where it's like, yep, you're hired. So this was the first experience where I was like, I'm not hearing anything. And I just wanted to tell your listeners, don't be afraid of the rejection. It's a little weird at first, but you get better at it. And each time you apply for something, it's a good experience. Like you learn something new. And the answer is almost no if you don't go for it either. So you might as well just
Mm.
try.
That's true. I saw something on Instagram recently where this gal was talking about how she is like her goal is to be rejected 5 times every day so that she builds up the resilience to bounce
Yes.
back more quickly.
Yes.
Mhm.
That makes sense, right? Because then you start to really refine and get good at your pitch, how you're showing up, what you notice, like makes someone pause. Maybe they still said no, but they didn't say no right away. They paused. You're like, oh, okay. So now I need to build on this and this. And you get bolder in what you want to ask for because you're not afraid of the rejection. I think there was a great quote from a guest I had on You Betcha She Did, and she was talking about how women often go for what they think they can get instead of going for what they really want. And I was like, oh, that is so true. We're just like, I think I can get this. I think I can ask for this instead of being like, no, this is actually what I want. And they can always say no, but it's like, why do we do that? We play it safe way too
Yeah.
much.
Way too much. Yeah. I've talked about the statistic of something like 70% of men apply to jobs
Yes.
that they're not really qualified for, whereas it's what, like half of that is how many women apply for it. We look at a job description and we think we have to have every single solitary being that's on there.
Yes.
And if something's missing, we're not good enough, we're not qualified, we shouldn't
Yep.
even try. And yeah, we need to be more like men in that respect. Be bold and be confident and be like, I got this. I could do that.
I can totally figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Because let's be honest, most of the time we would probably do a better job than that guy that's
I mean, if he's applying and we know he's mediocre
yeah.
and we're awesome and we're not applying, wait, we got to start applying.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not bashing on men.
What you're saying, sister, I totally get it.
Well, just because as women, we just have because most of our roles involve caretaking and nurturing. There's a lot of multitasking that's happening. And we have so many skills that we don't even realize that we're utilizing every day. And we just have so much to offer that we don't give ourselves credit for.
Exactly. And also, I think we do way too much unpaid work, like invisible work, free work. There's pressure to volunteer for this and do that and help out. And it's like, wait a second. Why isn't grandpa volunteering? Why isn't that man down the street volunteering? Like, why is it on the backs of women? I think we need to change that too.
Yeah. That made me think of something. It just left my mind. Anyway, yes. Oh, I had a guest on who she gave some statistic about how much unpaid labor women do as like in a lifetime or something.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, I can't remember the number, but it was
I know.
great.
And I think I came across that statistic too. And it's even if we got paid minimum wage for all of that, I was like, we would all be billionaires. The economy would be amazing because women are the biggest spenders in the economy. I was like, all these problems would be solved.
Yeah.
Let's just pay women minimum wage at least. For all this stuff.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your services and how you help people, what you have to offer.
Sure. I help in the podcasting space anywhere from launching a show, so designing it with your why in mind, getting it off the ground, to production. So if you need monthly production, you need someone to produce it. And then also I work with people like we were talking about, mostly entrepreneurs, but also niche podcasts where you've had a podcast maybe for a year or two and you're not seeing the growth you want, or you want to monetize it, but you haven't gotten there yet. You're not sure how that works. And in particular, I work with helping entrepreneurs monetize their show by bringing them more clients. So not necessarily with sponsors. Sponsorship is an option, but you really need high numbers, podcast numbers in order to do that. You need 1,000 downloads an episode after 30 days, which only the 20% of podcasts are in that. The 80% of the rest of the podcasters aren't there. And that's okay because you can still use your podcasts to elevate your authority, to grow your network, to bring you clients, to get you coverage. I've seen it work for my clients. Like my podcast, Betcha She Did, it's a top 3% podcast. So it's doing really well. It's a passion project. I make a little money from it, but mostly it's been all about just getting the word about Midwest women. And it's brought me a lot of neat things, a lot of speaking gigs. A magazine just did this feature on me with the cover spread, which was so cool. Nothing I ever was looking for, but I was like, oh, these are really nice perks of having a podcast. And then my other podcast, Growth Club, my audience isn't huge, but it's growing because I just started it last summer and it's making me money because it's bringing me podcast clients. But it's all about positioning yourself as an expert, showing you know what you're doing. You're showing how you can transform people. And so you can make a great income being an expert in whatever your area is, and then using that to grow your business. So, sorry, that was a lot of information, but that's what I do. All those things in the podcasting realm.
Awesome. And if people want to get a hold of you to find out more, where should they find you?
Yeah, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn at Rayna Rokicki. You can find me on my podcast, You Betcha She Did, or Podcast Growth Club. And then also you can just email me. My email is Rayna@ladiesfirstdigitalmedia.com. And you can find the website for my company too. It's just Ladies First Digital Media Company.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation and learning more about what you do and also the perspective that you have on helping women. And I just love that we're trying to do the same thing. And so it's been a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brittany. It's been great talking with you as well.
Thanks for tuning in to the Shift Your Day Job podcast. If you've loved this episode, leave a review. It helps more women find the show. Feeling stuck in your career? Let's connect. Follow me on social media at Shift Your Day Job or email me at shiftyourdayjob@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm Brittany Cates. Let's shift your day job together.